listening to Over the Oxer podcast with Tracy Cole for all things to do with the mind for equestrians. So today, I'm really delighted to welcome a really good friend of mine, a fabulous coach and author. Welcome to Seonaidh Jamieson. Shona is absolutely fascinated by the things that stop us doing what we want to do. And she's the author of Why You Skipped Your Workout. She rebels constantly, but she definitely rebels against the just do it culture and helps people to understand the barriers in our lives and then helps people to overcome them. So she helps people in making the steps easier so that your goals become almost inevitable. She combines her love of business with sport and horsemanship and all kinds of other things like pole dancing. And she's now in project management and has lots of experience of lots of business. So very warm welcome, Shona. Really lovely to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I still find it so strange hearing myself be introduced because I'm like, no, that's I am chaos. That's all. Which, yeah, it's yeah. Thank you for having me. I've been really looking forward to this.
So, in amongst all of that chaos, you've had such a fabulous journey. And we were just saying before we started recording that, you know, people won't believe that you're about 100 years old because you have done all kinds of things in life. So tell us, how did you get to this point?
Accidentally, predominantly. So I've always had a kind of dual industry life. So, and that's applied across everything I've done. I've had two favorite sports, two industries I work in. Even within the industries I work in, there tends to be two threads. I've just always had this kind of, oh, well, I want to do that too. And I've had this need to almost have different things going on at different points. So I started teaching pole dancing when I was in my teens. And I did that all the way through uni, where I got a zoology degree. And then I went into conservation. And in conservation, I did bat surveys and river restoration. And I did pole dancing and horse riding. And I had all of these different things where I always had two hats. And for a while, that felt really messy. And now I'm like, oh, no, what I do is I find the crossovers between different industries. That's where I live. That's where I'm comfortable. So where I am now is just this collection of all of these different things that I've gone, yeah, sure, why not? And yeah, sure, why not is that phrase is why I'm where I am just now. I mean, even down to, one of the weirdest jobs I've had, which is a horsey one. I was in the equestrian club at uni, standard. I had a car, and even though I didn't ride with the teams, because I had a car, I'd sometimes be asked to drive them out. 5 minutes before they had to leave for a lesson, I got a call. Can you pick us up? Our driver's car is broken down. Yeah, sure, whatever. So I drove the teams out. While we're there, it's like, oh, we need a driver tomorrow for something. Are you free tomorrow? And I was like, looked at my diary. Yeah, sure, whatever. And that's how I ended up working on the set of Outlander when they were filming the second season in Scotland with the horses. So like, that's like the cascade just goes from, yeah, I can do that. And it's just kind of rolled through everything. Now, what I hadn't realised, now this is where the invisible barriers comes in. So my book, Why You Skipped Your Workout, started as God, I really wonder why this is so hard. And it turned into a 2-year exploration of barriers and psychology and motivation and expectations and an ADHD diagnosis for me. So for my whole life, I'd had these barriers that I didn't understand. And it didn't make sense because in the right situation, yeah, I'll do that. And I would do that and I would do very well at that. But then I would struggle with other things. So one of my stories to really give people the level of the invisible barriers that I work with people on, I was the chair of a conservation charity by the time I was 26, which that seemed extreme and ridiculous. But 26 years old, chair of a charity, like that's pretty good going. I chaired more than one of those board meetings commando because I couldn't keep up with my washing. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, so like that I could not understand why I could be a chair of a charity and not have clean knickers. That just seemed like, why is that a problem? How is that a problem?
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that being the chair of a charity was exciting. It was interesting. There was other people. Doing my washing was boring. And if you're someone with ADHD, boredom is some sort of medieval torture.
Yeah.
So of course I struggled with that. And it's just everything I've done has ended up being about making it easier for people to do what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know how easy it is to get a lot done when what you're doing feels easy. That's how you end up chair of a charity in your mid-20s.
Yeah.
Not having clean underwear. That did not feel easy. I needed to make that easier. So there's a lot of things that are very contradictory in kind of how I got here. But it's those contradictions that mean no matter what people come to me with, whether it's a problem that seems insurmountable and huge, or if it's something that seems like it should be so straightforward, but for some reason has been the bane of their life.
Yeah.
Because sitting in a meeting and trying to be straight-faced when you are wearing jeans and no underwear is really hard.
That's an image that's now etched on my mind.
Everybody is welcome. I mean, you've got a horsey audience. We've all seen and done things that normal humans would look at like, oh my God. If any of the people I worked with at that time hear this, they'll be probably mortified and confused and concerned. But I think I've always wanted to share the embarrassing bits, because that's the bits where we need the most help. That's where there's the most invisible barriers. We can't see shame.
Yeah.
We can't see guilt. We can't see embarrassment. So if we take those away, we can start looking at the actual barriers that are there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of how I got here, is accidents and impulsivity.
Brilliant. So although you mentioned ADHD, and that may have been why you were interested in so many things and such a variety of things and things that seem to oppose one another, you don't necessarily work with people who've got ADHD, do you? They might do, incidentally, but so, you work with anybody, really, don't you?
Yeah, so I work with anyone who needs what I do, basically, and it tends to be either is having a crisis or wants to do something completely and utterly outlandish. There's kind of no in between. there's a problem or there's a really big goal that needs support and scaffolding around it. Now, I do a lot of work with people in business. I work with instructors and coaches and people who are in that world. I mean, I've got a lot of coaching experience in the pole dancing world. And it's amazing how many things from different sports can bleed across into each other. But I mean, I do work with mostly people with ADHD because those are the people who tend to need what I do.
Okay.
It's not an exclusivity thing. They're the people who choose me, and it works for me and for them. And for my clients that don't have ADHD, they usually have other constraints or other things that make their life more complicated. So say it's someone who, I'm going to use a friend of mine who I actually met because we didn't ride the same horse. We both knew the same horse, but didn't ride them at the same time. And that's how we met in some strange, convoluted way. But she has 3 kids that she homeschools and 2 businesses. Sorry, 3 businesses at the time.
Oh, God. Oh, wow.
So while she doesn't have ADHD, she has a complex life that has more constraints. So for her, doing a workout, well, that needs to fit within the confines of her life.
Yeah.
Going and doing things for her businesses needs to fit within the confines of her life. It has to work with the system that she's in.
Yeah. Yeah.
No matter what the shoulds or the it would be nice if or the vision boards, it's the real constraints that need a different approach. So she's got some visible barriers. Like there's visible things it's really easy to see, but it's needing a less than straightforward approach. And that tends to be what we need, especially for people who were diagnosed late with ADHD or autism or any number of other things that changes how you view yourself and view your life. And yeah, it's not just people with ADHD. That's the longest winded answer I've given to that question.
Oh, that's brilliant. That really explains that people who do have ADHD are sort of drawn to you because they know that you've got that level of understanding, and that they may be coming to you saying, well, my business is fine, but the rest of my life is chaotic. But also the non-ADHD people know that you have such a unique way of viewing the world and a unique way of seeing these invisible or visible barriers, and working out a very, it could be quite a different outside the box answer for their problems. I think that's the way your mind works, because like you say, you were a pole dancer, you were equestrian. How many people does that happen to? I know that we know a couple of people who are both, but it's unusual because most equestrians just don't have the time.
Sorry.
No, go on.
So I think there is definitely that kind of crossover, that blended thing. I definitely needed that novelty. That novelty from switching between things is what kept me going. That was how I essentially self-medicated. So that is how and why I was able to do that.
Yeah.
But also has made it really difficult for me to sit and do one thing. So if you have anyone on here who's really good at doing one thing, please let me know. I need to speak to them and learn their ways. But part of the reasons I've already said about my experience of chairing a charity, even more basic than that. So I have postgraduate degrees. I've studied lots. I nearly did a PhD and I limboed under that just before lockdown. So relief there. Academically, I did really well, but it wasn't until I started ADHD medication that I realized I couldn't read properly. My attention was so scattered that I couldn't look at a page and just read down. My eyes would be all over the place. I'd be jumping backwards and forwards. I never understood why people would read books for fun. I was like, this is terrible. And then the first day on my medication, I picked up a book and I just read a page and I was like, you are kidding me. What? This is how it's been? So everything I do, if I didn't even know I couldn't read properly, having been through uni,
yeah,
who am I to say what anyone else is struggling with or how valid or invalid that struggle is? I had no idea how hard I was working. I don't think any of us do until we get a comparison. So anytime any invisible barrier comes up, it's as real as a brick wall.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to your book, there's a line in your book that I really like, and I'm just paraphrasing, but it's about making time for a workout, and people's telling you, well, just make time because it's so important. And I suppose it's the same for the riders who lack motivation in riding. They want to ride, but they can't. And you kind of say that this kind of advice, when people say, well, just do it, and, come on, make time. There's 24 hours in a day. You say it's detrimental because it makes you feel like you're being lazy, or you're doing something that's not good for you or not good for your horse. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I am a big believer that people are doing the best they can all the time. Like, sometimes people are going to do things that are a bit less than great. They're, a bit self-destructive, maladaptive, what have you, but we're all trying our best. And if it was easy to just make the time, my book would not exist. If it was easy to just do it, I would not have needed to write my book. I would not have worked with hundreds of coaching clients over the years who need support with what seems like a basic thing. It's not basic. It's a fundamental problem that so many of us struggle with. And anyone who says, well, just do it, just be disciplined, just make the time, they're missing the point. Like, every single person I work with is intelligent, is capable, is resourceful. But you cannot think your way or resource your way out of an impossible situation. The only thing you can do is look at your constraints and then go with it and work out a way of making it easier to do what you need to do within those constraints. If we push against those constraints, we're using so much energy, almost like lifting up. Like, if you imagine you're in a tent and you're perpetually pushing it out, that's taking up more energy. If you just accept you're in a smaller tent and work within that, you can use that energy in other ways, whether that's spending more time with your horse, and accepting that some of the time you spend with your horse, you might not ride. You might not do these fantastic groundwork exercises. You might just sit and chill with them. If that's what you have energy for, if that's what you've got time for, if that's what you've got capacity for, who's to say that that is inherently a problem? When we've got big goals, like competing, we do need to start making that time. We do need to start carving it out. But usually to do that, we need more support. So when I've been working in the fitness sector, which I don't at the moment, I've had to make more time for my own training because I've had to stay up to date on different techniques that are coming through, different tricks that were coming up in the pole dancing world. I had to stay on top of my physiotherapy. I don't have the same need to do that now.
Mm-hmm.
So the balance for my own workouts has completely changed. There is less need, there is less pressure. It's harder for me to work out now than it has been at any other point in my life. If you're aiming for a competition, there's a lot that's going to push you and drive you towards doing stuff. And you're also going to have coaches and trainers and supporters and people around you who are helping you prepare for that, because just everything about what you're doing is more focused on that goal. If you're a happy hacker who's not been for a hack for 2 months, where's the push? Where's the drive coming from?
Mm-hmm.
That's where you possibly need a friend to come and walk with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And build that support in ways that work. I quite often use Andy Murray as an example for the support we need to do ridiculous things. So obviously Andy Murray, very accomplished tennis player. I think that's a fair statement. I think when he went to his last big international tournament, he had 17 different members of support staff.
Wow.
I think it was 17. I might have made that up. It might have been 11, but he had a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's difficult to think of, even if it's 11, what they all do. you know.
Totally. He'd have physiotherapists, he'd have tennis coaches, he'd have his mum, his wife, he'd have nutritionists, he'd have mindset specialists, he'd have all of this support, because one person cannot do what he did without support from other people.
Yeah.
So if you're struggling to do something and someone said, well, just make the time, that doesn't give you more drive towards your goal. It doesn't give you any more energy or resources to put into it. And it doesn't give you any more scaffolding around you to make it possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you've ever had advice that's like, well, just sort it, just do it.
Yeah.
The person giving that advice will mean well, and that level of advice will have worked for them.
Yeah.
And that I'm jealous of those people.
Yeah,
they probably have a much easier time. Like, well, just do it. Like, well, great. Can you bottle whatever it is that lets you just do it? But for most of us, that's not the reality. And I mean, thinking any other way it just damages our self-esteem. It means we're fighting harder against ourselves. We're using more energy to just like ourselves. Mm-hmm. And like, that's exhausting.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. So do you think it's a question of priorities or expectations, maybe unrealistic expectations, or do you think it's more complex than that?
I think so everything I've done has worked on systems. So I've worked on rivers, I've worked with bodies. You push in one area, something changes somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be an interaction of all of the different things in our world and in our lives. I think where our priorities and expectations come in is that everything is a priority and we expect 100% of ourselves all of the time.
Right. Okay.
Especially with the clients I work with, where we're split, and I've been split in multiple different ways in different places. I mean, priorities is something that I've always struggled with, mm-hmm. because I've always wanted to do all of the things. And yeah, that's totally bitten me in the butt several times. So now I do make the effort to prioritize for myself. But the struggle is real, working out what isn't important. When it comes to our expectations, I think expectations play such a huge role in everything we do. If you have really high expectations for yourself and then you perform well, not excellently, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you have low expectations of yourself and you perform poorly, but not terribly, you're going to be delighted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that. I mean, how many of us have that friend who was, they got 98% on an exam and they were devastated?
Yeah. Yeah. What did I get wrong?
What did I get wrong? And then you've got someone who got a C and they are like, punching the air and dancing and yelling, and they got kicked off a bus because they were celebrating for half an hour, and someone thought,
Yeah.
you know, we've all had that. We've all done this to ourselves, where our expectation has been absolutely outlandish. And when it comes to doing really difficult stuff, whether that's breaking in a horse, whether that's reclaiming your confidence riding, starting a business, writing a book, whatever it is you're doing, we're not very good at working out how long things are going to take. So we set an expectation about how long it's going to take us to get there that's unrealistic right off the bat. And that counts doubly for those of anyone listening who has ADHD. Like, time blindness is a real thing, and it's something that we can work with, and we can learn logical ways of managing it. But our gut, our intuitive, our feeling responses to making plans is usually, this will take X amount of time, when actually it's going to take double that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just puts so much more pressure on us. And that pressure adds invisible barriers.
Yeah.
Because then we're fighting with ourselves again and using more energy to try and do something that wasn't realistic in the first place.
Yeah. I suppose you're fighting frustration, disappointment, regret, you're beating yourself up, and you're layering all these negative emotions and probably creating a load more self-limiting beliefs at the same time. So do you think we're wired that way? Is anything in your research or anything that you found in your work that we are wired to have these unrealistic expectations, or that we think we can do it in half the time?
I think it's less that we're not rewired for that specifically. Why would we need to be wired for that?
Yeah.
So this is where our brains are really good at doing what they need to keep us going. There's a lot of things our brains do very quickly. There's a lot of biases. There's a lot of inherent things that our brain will take. So let's just take this as an example. If you ask someone how an exam went, they're not going to tell you how the exam went. They're going to tell you how it felt.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a different answer.
Yeah.
Let's think of our people with our expectations again. We have someone who's gone in expecting to absolutely nail it, and they think they got one question wrong. That exam went terribly.
Yeah.
Because it felt bad compared to what they were expecting. Then we have someone who goes in expecting to not be able to answer any questions, and they answered half of them. That went so much better than I thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you ask them how it went, on paper, the person who got 98% has objectively done significantly better, if not almost twice as well, as the person who just scraped a C.
Yeah.
But when you ask them, you're going to get completely different answers, because our brain is wired to answer the easiest question.
Yeah.
We don't know how we did. We don't have the answer sheet. So we answer with how it felt. And the same goes across planning, prioritizing, schedule. Like, we're just not designed to take the step back and separate those questions and those assumptions. Because if we did, we wouldn't do anything. We would be paralyzed.
Yeah.
So these are really important mechanisms for keeping us functioning and moving, but they have their limitations. And when you're doing something completely bonkers, we brush up against those limitations so much more. Because if you expect starting a business to be hard, but only take a few months for it to feel like regular and okay.
Yeah.
And it takes bit of research from a completely different industry. For the average kind of shop front, it takes about 7 years for them to settle into a set way of doing and showing things. 7 years.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Have you thought that
businesses fold? I mean, that kind of it. A lot of them fold well within 7 years.
Exactly. So if you expect it to take a year, but that's only 1/7 of the time it takes on average, of course you're going to be disappointed. The advantage we have when we start looking at bigger projects, like, I mean, let's take bringing a horse back into work. I've never met a horsey person who isn't super patient with their horses. Let's look at bringing a person back into work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Immediately, we're like, well, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I should be doing... When we're thinking about our horse, we think of all of the different variables. We think about giving them contingency. We think about giving them space to be emotional beings with their own needs and their own like requirements for how you do things. I remember once working with a horse who I mean, he was a sweetie. He was a big ex-punter, total softie. I'm 5'4". He was 17'3". It was ridiculous, but he was a babe. He'd been out of work for a little while, and we'd been getting back into things. He was getting fitter. We were doing more ridden work. He was doing great. But we went into the arena, and then it started hailing. He did not like the hail. So what went from, okay, we're going to work on some transitions, we're going to work on like his responsiveness, we're going to work on just getting him like just a little bit more tuned in, turned into, we're just going to try and chill out in the hail.
Yeah.
I couldn't have asked, you know, he did very well, and he was quite a spooky chap. So it was definitely you know, when you're like, I'm going to stay on. I hope. He was very sweet, but he was quite spooky. And, you know, it was that thing of just keep him moving, keep telling him when he's doing things well, keep, you know, using the things in the school to just keep him focused on me. That was not the plan.
Yeah.
Was I annoyed at him for that? Did I think he had done something wrong? Did I think my plan had failed because of that? Absolutely not. If I had got on him and I had been stressed about work or something was going on and my head wasn't in the game, would I have given myself that same grace? Probably not.
No. That's really curious metaphor, isn't it? And it just shows you how we think, because you're so right. We're quite prepared to bring it down a notch when we've got a horse that, like you say, we're either training or bringing back into work. But you wouldn't give yourself that same kind of leeway, would you? You just wouldn't. You'd be like, well, why can't I do that? I should be able to do that. We really do find lots of ways to beat ourselves up quite a lot of the time.
For a lot of us, we do that because it's the quickest way of getting things done.
Yeah.
If again, I'm going to call back to kind of ADHD and kind of some interesting things there, which for your audience, I think they'll find interesting anyway. I always just thought I had anxiety. Then I started taking my ADHD medication. Anxiety went, it was load-bearing anxiety.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have the brain chemistry to do things from a place of motivation, from a place of moving towards something, my brain substituted that with adrenaline and cortisol. It is far easier to get a result by beating yourself up, leaning into those stress hormones, than it is to do the work to imagine what we could end up with, to move towards a positive outcome. And for many people I know who've been used to running away from bears, like relying on those stress hormones, when you stop running away from bears, there is no positive outcome that feels as compelling as escaping a life or death threat, real or imagined.
Yeah.
So then, well, I'm not running away from a bear anymore. I'm not trying to do this thing. I'm not trying to solve this problem with my horse because my horse might kill me if it does this again. You know, we're not running away from that. We're moving towards, my horse is going to be like a lovely member of society, and I'm going to have this lovely like time hacking with them, and I can take them to like, it's far more compelling to solve a problem than it is to arrive at a positive. So if we are not arriving at that positive quick enough, let's beat ourselves up again. Let's get some of the stress hormones back because they're really helpful.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's sorry, just to tie all of that into kind of those expectations in our brains, like connecting things in different ways. We try and do things the quickest and most efficient way we can, even when that means that we miss out details that would give ourselves an easier life. Like, is this a reasonable expectation I'm holding of myself? None of us ask that question. We assume our expectations are fun.
Yeah.
They are often not.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
There's definitely, it's going to be an interaction between different people, how these things all play in. But, you know, we're all afraid of not finishing the thing, not doing the thing, we're all afraid of failing in some way, shape, or form. But when we only rely on that fear of failure to keep us motivated, we miss out on so much that could be given to us by having scaffolding and support and understanding. And the more invisible a barrier is, the more we rely on beating ourselves up to overcome it, because it's not a real problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it is. It's the most real problem there is.
Yeah.
I once had someone say to me, like, well, it's just in your head. And it's like, well, yeah.
Yeah, of course
Like,
it
I've
is.
seen this trope a few times, but like having someone say it to me in real life, I was like, yeah, it's in my head. That's where I live.
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
that's important. So the thing I would say to kind of help people with this, if you're listening to this and thinking, oh God, I really do beat myself up, just ask yourself, are your expectations for this reasonable?
Yeah.
And how can I set kinder expectations?
Yeah. Yeah. And that works so much better, doesn't it? Maybe smaller expectations and stepping stones to get those little hits along the way rather than the huge, great plan that you think you can accomplish in a week.
Completely. I mean, how many times have you been? I remember working with a different horse, not the one who was scared of the hail, another one, a little sassy cob gelding, the classic coloured cobs that really have more attitude than any beings on the planet. Properly cheeky little guy, but he tried so hard. The first time I asked him for a walk to canter transition, he offered me something. And I was delighted. It was not a walk to canter transition. He kind of just hopped and trotted off really messily, like, oh my God, what did you want? And it was like, he offered me something.
Yeah.
His owners looked so concerned. I was delighted.
Yeah.
Because he responded. I didn't need him to get it right first time. I didn't need him to be perfect. I just needed him to have a guess.
Yeah.
And he guessed, and then he got it. And then we would be walking on a loose rein and he'd offer me a canter transition and I'd be like, okay, like you're a bit gung-ho, but cool, we nailed it. One of the most forward little horses I've ever sat on. He was like so willing to work. But in that moment, all I needed from him was something.
Yeah.
And he gave me something and it was hilarious. I don't even know what happened. It was just a general like, oh, I have too many legs. And they're tripping off. But if I attempted something and got it that quote unquote wrong, would I be delighted?
Yeah.
I can tell you right now I would not be. And it's something I'm working on. But for horsey people, it's easy because we have these like really close relationships with this animal that we trust and we work with, and we are so kind to them.
Yeah.
We need to bring ourselves the same level of kindness, because otherwise one side of that partnership is perpetually running away from something.
Yeah.
Or thinking they're not enough, or just not showing up and being present for both of you in that room, in that moment, because of those invisible barriers we're putting in our mind that usually are the result of us thinking we need to be perfect, or we need to do it quicker, or we need to be stronger, or, there's so many different ways that we set ourselves these impossible expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. We're absolute masters at it, aren't we? We're really good.
Oh yeah. Especially I don't know if you would mirror this, but I found that like with kind of dressage and showing and things like that, that's so much worse. Show jumping is a bit more like pull, stay up, in time.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Like, cool. Whereas when you're going for a sport that's based on aesthetics, nightmares.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking from the pole world, when I was doing my highest kind of level of pole dancing, it did not feel good in my body. Because I was not pole dancing for what felt good. I was pole dancing for what looked good.
Right, yeah.
So I would push further to get that line. I would push further to get that lift. I would push further to get that higher or better or stronger or quicker or smoother or whatever it was. And that is another place we can have those expectations. Show jumping, obviously there's lots of expectations there. We don't want to watch a video of ourselves and be like, oh my God, what was I doing?
Yeah.
But we're being graded on pull, stay up, in time.
Yeah.
It's much easier to give yourself grace for, oh God, you got out of that combination well, you saved yourself.
Yeah.
Than it is in dressage when it's like, oh God, that walk was a bit shit, wasn't
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you've got that subjective element to it, it's more difficult, isn't it? It's a much more difficult area of equestrianism, I think. I like the show jumping because, like you say, it's straightforward. You may not look good, but you've got a clear round. Who cares?
But you can make either. I mean, I've not competed at high levels in either discipline. I've competed more in pole dancing than I have horse riding. But you can make either as technical as high level. You can do what you want with it depending on what you do inside your own head.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've not met any show jumpers that aren't also perfectionists.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form,
Yeah. Yeah.
But
yeah.
it's far easier to, when you're grading yourself on every little thing you do, you can spiral in a way that's much harder when you're like, okay, I've got two things to do, time and pulls up. So for those of you who are listening who are, into showing or into your dressage or anything where you're really being studied for, where your pinkies are, remember you've got a whole rest of your body to manage. If your pinky was doing something wonky, like, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, look at all the rest of it that you're getting right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got one last question for you, or one last thing that I'd love your opinion on and an explanation of. In your book, you tell us about life is like a river, which is a lovely metaphor, and I thought it was really powerful. Can you just tell us a bit more about that?
So this is something that rivers are complicated systems. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm just going to give you a quick example of some work I did on a project a few years ago, where there was this wonderful, like, gravelly, silt-free bit of a river that was used by trout for laying their eggs. They had lots of reds. They were doing all the things they needed to do there, doing really well. But over the years, there was just starting to be more silt coming into that bit of the river. And the silt was going in and filling in the gaps in the gravel. Now, the gaps in the gravel is how the oxygenated water would get through, flow over the eggs. That's how the reds work. The silt was filling that in, so the trout were having less and less success with their eggs. So when you look at that, you think, well, there's silt in this bit of the river. That's a problem. We need to fix it. But with rivers, you have to look upstream. You have to keep going upstream and seeing what's happening. And upstream from this bit of the river with the trout was a beech woodland. Now, beech, beautiful trees, but rubbish understory. Rubbish understory, nothing holding the soil together. Nothing holding the soil together, soil washed into your waterways, flows downstream, fills in those gaps in the soil, in the gravel, sorry. So what we did was, on specific areas of this woodland that were quite steep sloped, we felled some of the mature beech trees and planted up native broadleaves. So I'm in the north of England. Beech trees aren't native this far north. So we planted up some other species. We started supporting that understory to hold that soil together, to keep that soil from being washed into the river every time it rained. So we were changing the makeup of a forest to help fish.
Yeah, yeah.
We need to look further upstream in our own lives to find where the woodland is that needs a bit of a rejig. And when we start doing that, we just make everything easier. Everything flows better. We don't want everything to flow so quickly that it's flashy and it floods and then dries out. We don't want everything to flow so slowly that there's no water anywhere. We want everything to flow through. We want it to flow through well. We want to look. If you're struggling with your workout isn't the problem. It's something upstream. What do you need to do to go upstream and set yourself up to make it easier to do your workout? And it could be something completely unrelated.
Yeah.
Thinking about, changing trees to help fish is a ridiculous leap. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
But when you look at your life on the whole, it's just as complicated and integrated a system as a river. So if you are struggling to work on your own fitness, say you and your horse, you're doing really well, you're doing everything you need to for them, everything is on point at the yard, but you've got a niggly hip thing that you've got physio for and you're just not doing it. Your physio is not the point of the problem. We need to look upstream. How are you supporting yourself to get ready to do your physio? For me, my big barrier to working out at home during lockdown was hoovering. If I hadn't, no matter what else is going on, if I needed to hoover before I felt like I could work out, I wasn't working out because I didn't want to hoover. So I had to be really strict about my hoovering so I could work out more regularly.
Yeah.
So it's looking upstream to find the block. And as you go upstream, you'll probably find other things too.
Yeah.
You'll probably find other things, but we were just tending towards having better quality problems and easier problems. But it's all interlinked. So, but often people come to me with a problem being consistent with their workouts. And then they'll tell me that they're caring for an elderly parent. They've got 2 kids under 2. Their business is failing. And it's like, I don't think you need to worry about your workouts right now. I think there's some upstream stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
And as much as people love to think it, we exist in the same body and brain, no matter what we're doing. So you cannot say, I really loathe this like old-fashioned thing of like, well, I'm a completely different person at work. You're not. You're the same person. We show different bits of ourselves, but the weight we carry at home comes with us to work. Whether or not we choose to acknowledge it is another question, but it's still there. So if we're struggling with something, there's weight from other places that we need to consider. And in the book, there's more of a description about there's a more in-depth metaphor that I use around how you can think differently about your workouts, but the overall message is it's all connected, whether we like it or not. So we might as well lean into that and start looking upstream.
Yeah.
So that's where we find all the invisible problems, usually. Invisible barriers. They're up there somewhere. Expectations tend to be right at the top, really setting the tone.
Yeah.
So if you want to go like really like into the expectations and our beliefs about ourselves, they are right at they're far up in the catchment, influencing everything that happens downstream.
Yeah. Oh, it's fascinating. So can you tell us, where can we find you on the internet? Where can we find you on socials? And tell us where we can get your book.
So what I'll do is I'll share my my website with you, because my name is a nightmare to spell. So I'll give you that to put in the show notes. And my Instagram got hacked recently, so I'm not on Instagram at the moment. So I'm more active on LinkedIn than anywhere else, which feels appalling. So if you look at my spelling of my name in the description and the show notes and you look me up, I'm the only one. So it just Seonaidh Jamieson, LinkedIn. I also have a work Facebook account which I can share as well, and people can
lovely
can join me there. But in general, the easiest way to get me is to go on my website and book a call.
Lovely. And your book? Can we get that?
Book? Oh yeah, so the book there's links to it through my website, but it's on Amazon. If you look up Why You Skipped Your Workout or my name, again, there's only one of me. So yeah, if you look up just Why You Skipped Your Workout on Amazon, it's there. And watch the space, because book number 2 is in the works.
Will you come back and tell us about book number 2 when you're all finished and published?
You can try and stop me. Yeah, for sure.
Brilliant. I can't wait. Thanks ever so much. That's been absolutely super. I could talk to you all day, but I know you're a very busy lady. You've always got about 1,000 things on, so I better let you go.
Thank you so much for having me.